Good afternoon. It is Monday, July 18th, and I'm a little late on this reply. Once again, a lot of things have been going on, but definitely wanted to get this video response to you before you take Twiz 2. We're now in the final section of the course where we're looking at literature from 1830 to 1865. We're focused initially on the era of reform, and Harriet Jacobs is a part of that. Her pseudonym is Linda Brent in Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. And that's the video, or that's the discussion board I'd like to respond to. I don't have a whole lot to say, but I just wanted to emphasize a few important points. First of all, something that I noted was that Christy had noted she felt bad for Linda Brent. Melissa said she actually cried in some spots. April commented on the role of mother, and she kind of focused on Linda Brent's role as mother and how awful it would be to lose one's children. And I was really pleased at those responses because one of the things that sets Harriet Jacobs' slave narrative apart from others is she is appealing to women. She is considering women as her audience, and she tries to establish her credibility first by appealing to that ideal of true womanhood. And again, I hope you're looking at the reading guides. I was kind of reviewing what I put in there for you, and under Harriet Beecher Stowe's reading guide in particular, that cult of true womanhood or cult of domesticity is addressed. And that was an important ideal in the 19th century where women were, to be submissive, Christian piety. They were the moral compass in the home. They were to exert their influence from the private sphere and not in the public sphere. They were not to be in politics. They were not to hold public office. They were not to work out in the world, but that they were to be submissive to their husbands. They were to be pious. They were to exert their influence from the home. They were the moral compass, etc. Well, it's very difficult for a woman who uses her sexuality to escape sexual and psychological abuse, perhaps to be taken seriously by women who were very serious about this cult of true womanhood. The men were too, and someone had mentioned in a small group discussion about men being influenced by this, and it was something that they adhered to. But Harriet Beecher Stowe, who I know is different from this discussion board, Harriet Beecher Stowe, there's Thomas, that's Thomas Cole, not named for the famous painter you studied, the Hudson River School of Artists, and how he influenced William Cullen Bryant, and those wonderful landscape paintings when you were reading Washington Irving. That a little bit of that stuff appears on Twiz 2. This is Thomas Cole, spelled C-O-A-L, for the coal mining of West Virginia, and he's black as coal. He was my mother's cat that we adopted. But anyway, that is a tangent. Back to these women writers. Harriet Beecher Stowe used that cult of true womanhood and used sentimental literature, really appealing and playing on women's emotions to get her point across in her writing. And Harriet Jacobs uses some of those same techniques in her Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. So I really like that some of the women in class, really responded strongly to Harriet Jacobs' writing, and I thought that illustrated well the whole approach that Harriet Jacobs took. The only other thing I wanted to address, the idea of power and control. I mean, this was serious psychological abuse that Flint inflicted on Linda Brent in the narrative, and awful, and some people, it was kind of interesting. We could do a psychological study on what these people said. Talked about it's kind of father-like he was like a father, and then the feelings changed. Really, it was April, I think, and Christy who talked about the power and control. It really was a matter of, this was a way for this man to exert power and control in a really inhumane and terrible way. So the institution of slavery, pretty darn awful, no matter whether it's from a male or a female perspective. But Linda Jacobs did bring in, for one of the first times ever, the idea of sexual abuse and psychological abuse. I know we fear, and we read stories of physical abuse, like in Douglas's narrative, and his aunt being whipped before his eyes, and the physical abuse that he suffered. He focuses on literacy, violence, and individualism in his narrative, whereas Jacobs looks at relationships, and especially roles in families, mother, wife, and that kind of thing. So it was pretty groundbreaking, Linda Brent's or Harriet Jacobs' narrative. Last thing I wanted to give you a hint about was Patrick's thread. He happened to have chosen a quotation that I think you will find very useful to you on TWIS 2. I want to remind you, on TWIS 2 it's going to be like TWIS 1 in that you have five passages, and you're to identify the writer and the work from which that passage comes. I don't give you a specific term to use, like I did in the last TWIS, but I still want you to explain the significance of that quote to our study of American literature, to that time period, to something. But again, don't say that this quote comes from this because it's explaining that, and that's why it's from that. That's circular. I want to know why it's important, not why is it a passage from that work, if that makes sense. Why is it important, not why is it a passage from that work. So I hope that you can improve a little bit on that from the last TWIS. And from Keller, I will say good afternoon.